What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be going over the close range and long range meta currently in Warzone on 4/21/24. I've already done meta videos for this season about a week and a half ago, but some stats have changed since then, and I didn't have time to go in super depth in that video, so I spent a ton of time on this one going through and really looking at all the stats, and I used the community's accuracies as well, so this is going to be an interesting video for you guys. Whenever I bring those accuracies in there. But as always, if you guys like the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video, drop a comment, but let's get into it and cover these best loadouts. Today's sponsor is Arena Breakout. This is an intense, tactical, first-person extraction shooter available for both Android and iOS, and as many of you probably know, the Android release of Warzone Mobile didn't go very well. It doesn't run very well on a lot of Android phones. I've personally played Arena Breakout on my iPad, my iPhone, and my Android S23, and it runs a smooth 120 FPS and looks great on all those devices. You can kind of think of the game as a more realistic and rewarding version of DMZ. There's multiple maps, there's AI and real players on the map, and basically your goal is to load into one of the maps and basically find as much loot as you can and extract with that loot successfully. After successfully extracting with all of the loot from one of your rounds, you can take that loot and sell it directly to players in the marketplace, where you can then use that cash to buy better weapons and attachments for the weapons that you have or any other equipment that you may need. So one of my favorite things about this game is just how detailed and almost realistic the gunsmith system is. So if you open up the gunsmith, you can select your weapons. So AK-74N here. Something you can see is that down at the bottom we have the attachment slots. And right now there's no option for me to put an optic on there. And that's because if you look at the gun, there is no receiver on top with an actual mounting system. So I actually have to come in here and change the receiver on my AK to have a top mounting system. Then you can see the top mount allows me to put any of these optics on there. So it's pretty cool. It's just more, detailed and in-depth than COD, and there's actually more attachments as well. And because it's so differentiated between different attachments, there ends up being no real one true meta. So you can kind of craft the weapons to be how you want to play, and it's not like COD where you feel like you absolutely have to use the meta to have a chance to survive. You can really kind of play how you want to play, which I think is pretty cool. Season 4 of Arena Breakout just released, so now is the perfect time to jump into the game. If you want to try it out, my special download link is in the video description as well as a pinned comment, and a huge thank you to Arena Breakout for sponsoring this video. So like I said, I actually used the community accuracies for this video, so how I get those is through the True TTK simulation on TGD. This is a feature that I built that allows you to build out the weapons on TGD with the attachments that you're actually going to use. You come in here and you can set it up how you want as far as what you want to calculate, TTK, DPS, DPM, what you want to include, bullet travel time, ADS time, open bolt delay, all those different stats, what input you're on, and then you just input your accuracies from the firing range. Now, I've covered this before. I'll put a link to the video down below where I cover how to actually get these tests done. Basically, you just shoot the last target dummy in the firing range, 10 times or so, and get the average accuracy from that. So if I just plug in random values here so you guys can see how this works. Then I press simulate, I get a real TTK chart or DPS, damage per mag. You can do both of those as well. And this is based on a simulation of the accuracies that you input. So I basically take the accuracy you input, and I know the target dummy is 55 meters away, and then I just extrapolate that accuracy out to all the different damage ranges. So from 0 up to 100 meters, you can get your true TTK from your accuracy values. So I did that for this video, and then down here at the bottom, you can weight your engagement probability by distance. So this basically means that you can put a different weighting on each distance in this chart. So if the TTK at 40 meters is really important to you, you can slide this mean up to 40 and then lower the standard deviation so it's a much more pointed graph right at 40 meters, and then you can use that to weight the output and say, okay, the weapons that are really good with my accuracies right around 40 meters using this distribution, calculate that, and it'll give you the weighted TTK across this whole range using this weighting pattern. So as always, the absolute best way for you to get your real best weapons in this game is to use this tool. I would use MetaGen as well as this tool to kind of combine and get a good idea for what you're really going to be best with. So that's why I built this, because the whole mantra of TGD at this point is find your meta, not what I tell you is best, not what anyone else tells you is best. We have tools on TGD to help you figure out for yourself what you are the best with, because these weapons have different feelings and recoil patterns and things that you might be better with, certain ones that other people aren't better with. So coming back to this now, when you guys use the True TTK simulation tool on TGD, I actually record all of that input data. So I have tens of thousands of lines of accuracies for all these different weapons. So I can get a really good feel for community averages for how the accuracies line up for these different weapons. So that's what I've got over here, the top performers as well as their accuracies for all these different weapons. And then I have the weighted average DPS and weighted average TTK, both at 30 meters and 40 meters. So 30 meter average is more for like a Rebirth long range gun, 40 meters more for a big map long range weapon. So what I mean by that is I changed the slider on here. So 30 meters with a 20 meter standard deviation. This is more the weighting that I use for Rebirth. And then 40 meters with a 20 meter standard deviation for the big maps. I also added in a column over here for the ADS time. This is of basically the meta build for these weapons, just so I can do this calculation here, which is ADS plus TTK. And in this video, I think right now Rebirth is a lot more popular than Big Map, so I am using the weighted average TTK from Rebirth and adding in the ADS time. That is what's in column C here. So that is what these are ranked by currently. And you can see that up the top, we have a surprise. The Pulemyot 762 with the conversion kit has a really high accuracy and a great ADS plus TTK at that 30 meter average. And it's also awesome on Big Map. It's also #1 on Big Map. You can see here, looking at this column H. So Pulemyot's performing exceptionally well. I'm not going to go through all this, just a couple mentions here. I didn't actually split out these accuracies because you guys input either keyboard and mouse or controller when you're using the True TTK simulation tool. I can actually split it out, and I've done that in the past. But in this one, I just used the community averages. But I did look at basically the input preference, so how the accuracies vary. So if this column here, column M, shows the input preference. So a positive number indicates that it performs better on keyboard and mouse. A negative number indicates that it performs better on controller. So you can see that the Pulemyot performs 3.5% better than expected compared to controller when you're on keyboard and mouse. The BP50, 1.4% better on keyboard and mouse. And then on the other side of things, the SVA 545 and MTZ 556 both perform quite a bit better on controller. So to keep that in mind, SOA Subverter also performs better on keyboard and mouse than you would expect. And same with the Holger 556. So really, any of these top 6 weapons are excellent. We got the Pulemyot and BP50, which lean a little bit towards keyboard and mouse bias for how they perform, but they were the top of the community average, which included controller accuracies. So they're going to be excellent on controller as well. And then SVA 545, MTZ 556, these lean a little bit towards controller, 4.3% and 2.9% more accurate than expected on controller. And then we have the less accurate but hard-hitting weapons. We got the Bruen and the SOA Subverter down here in 5th and 6th place. And the Subverter would be near the top. It's just that it has a really bad ADS time when you build it out for recoil. So 451, it has by far the worst ADS time of all of these. So if ADS time is not super important to you, then the Subverter is going to be much closer to the top here for sure. All right, so the close range meta is a little easier to define, in my opinion. Long range, we got a lot of really good options right now, and I think it's really going to come down to personal preference, which is why you should just use the True TTK simulation tool on TGD to really find out what you're the best with. But the close range meta here, we've got WSP 9 in red, HRM 9 in orange, Striker 9 in blue, WSP Swarm in green, and then the MCW in yellow. So this is the MCW with the conversion kit. This has a phenomenal TTK, so right off the bat you can see down here at the bottom, yellow, the MCW with conversion kit has that awesome time to kill out to about 20 meters. It's faster than everything in that whole range, which for close range, if you can get the sprint to fire and the ADS to be relatively competitive, having the fastest time to kill just ends up time and time again being the most important thing. So right off the bat, the MCW looks awesome. The WSP Swarm in green here has the second fastest time to kill, but it only goes out to 8.7 meters. So that's really not going to be super competitive in my opinion, just because from 8 up to 20, 25 meters, it's not good at all. You can see that green line's way up there. And you have a ton of engagements in that range with your close range weapon out. So I just don't think it's going to be super competitive just because of that. Next up, HRM in orange. You can see that this has an excellent time to kill, almost as fast as the WSP Swarm and the MCW, just a little bit slower. But it's old faithful, man. It has great ADS, great sprint to fire, good enough damage per mag, good enough recoil, great mobility. It's kind of the jack of all trades. It's just really good at everything. So that's why it ends up being just pretty much the meta for the last couple months. It's been up there and hasn't really been tweaked too much. In blue, we have the Striker 9. It's pretty competitive. It's about 20 28 milliseconds slower in the first damage range, and then just kind of holds that being slightly slower than the HRM out at all ranges. And it's a reasonably competitive weapon, but it's just that the HRM is just a little bit better at everything, it seems like. So that's kind of why people lean towards the HRM. But the Striker 9 is absolutely a very usable weapon. And then in red here, up on top, we have the WSP9. This is highly competitive if you ignore the open bolt delay. So open bolt delay is something that only a few weapons have, and it's basically when you pull the trigger, the bullet doesn't fire immediately. So all the other weapons fire immediately. WSP9 does not, and this chart is including that. So you can turn that off, and when I turn that off, you see the red WSP9 drops all the way down to basically match the MCW exactly. So in situations where open bolt delay doesn't matter, so maybe like team fights where you're not getting shot back at, it doesn't matter so much because the target's not going to know they're getting shot until a bullet actually lands on them. So in those cases, open bolt delay doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter very much, at least. But in situations where you both see each other at the same time, you both shoot, those are the most important, in my opinion, because those are the situations where you can die. That is when open bolt delay should be included. So if we turn that back on, you can see it is going to lose to most of these other weapons in those scenarios. But it is still a great option. It has great mobility, damage per mag, easy recoil. One more thing to note about it, it has pretty slow fire rate. So that means that when you start missing the target, when you bring your crosshair back onto the target, it could take a little extra time compared to these other weapons to get that next bullet on to the target. And if that next bullet was just enough with both weapons to down the target, then that means that you have more TTK added in that scenario than some of these faster firing weapons. It just tends to be more forgiving to have a high fire rate. So that's another negative about the WSP. So with that in mind, let's build the absolute best loadouts in the game right now. So we're going to start with the SOA Subverter. Dozer 90 long barrel is awesome for bullet velocity and recoil and damage range. I like to keep things suppressed, so we're going to throw on the VT7 Spiritfire suppressor. It has a stock that helps with recoil a bunch. It does really kill your ADS though, so if you use this weapon and you feel like you can get away without this 12% recoil, then you could use the ST88, which only has 8% recoil, but it does hurt your gun kick, so it's going to make the crosshairs move around a little bit more and shift away from the center of the screen a little bit more than the motion heavy. So I'm going to go with the motion heavy. Magazine, we're going to use 50 round drum. And then I think that this is going to be controversial, but there's a few different options here. There is the standard Bruen heavy support, which people like a lot because it helps with visual recoil and horizontal, but they've kind of nerfed that horizontal down to being only 8% now. And this gun has quite a bit of vertical recoil as well. So I think for mouse and key players, Bruen heavy support, great option. But for controller players who have a little harder time with that vertical recoil, probably use the Lock Grip Precision 40. This gives you, instead of -4 for vertical, it gives you plus an extra 9% of vertical recoil control. So significantly better there for controller players. And I think this is a weapon that you kind of need to use iron sights on because you need that 5th attachment to help with the recoil. So this is my recommended SOA Subverter. All right, next up, the Bruen here. We're going to leave the default mag on there. I just feel like first of all, the 60 round mag actually increases your open bolt delay by a little bit. Looks like about 27 or 17 milliseconds, so not a huge deal, but it's just something to consider. Like I said, I like to be suppressed. I think most people should like to be suppressed, so we're going to use the Spiritfire suppressor. I think a lot of people use this FT Ferocity long range barrel, but I think that recoil is more important than damage range, so I think the XRK Horizon is a little bit better, so we get 9% recoil across the board, a little bit more bullet velocity, and it's much better for the ADS penalty, which as an LMG, I mean, that's a significant difference there. That's like 41 milliseconds ADS time difference, so I think the XRK Horizon is a little bit better. Pretty standard here. We're going to use the Bruen heavy support. I've used a bunch of these different underbarrels trying to prepare for this video, and for some weapons, there's some other options, but for this one, it just really feels like the Bruen heavy support gives you the best recoil. Jack glassless optic, and then rear grip, we're going to use the Stip 40 grip, no ADS penalty, which is ideal for an LMG. So pop that on there, and this is going to be a really, really accurate, good at pretty much all ranges Bruen Mark 9. All right, onto the MTZ 556. This build is going to look a little weird, but I tried this out in the firing range, and I think it's really the best way to do it. So 50 round drum, of course. It's got a really nice stock here. The EXF close quarters assault stock really helps with recoil a bunch. This has a pretty aggressive S-shaped recoil pattern, especially at the start of the pattern. So we're going to actually use the Komodo Heavy. So this does a huge amount of horizontal recoil, 27%, and then 7% vertical and 10% gun kick. Barrel wise, there's a few good barrels. This MTZ Clinch Pro is very good. So is the Drifter Heavy long barrel. Get a little more bullet velocity with the Clinch Pro, but I want as much recoil help as possible, so we're going to use the Drifter Heavy long barrel. And then I think for the last attachment, the best option is just to use the Jack Glassless. So this is this optic helps with visual recoil. So this still has a pretty aggressive S-shaped recoil pattern, but it's very controllable, and you know, it's got a little visual shake. If the visual shake is too much for you, you can try swapping this stock for the Bruen heavy support, but that's just it's gonna have a lot of recoil if you do that. So just keep that in mind. All right, onto the SVA 545. This is not the semi-auto build. This is just going to be built for full auto. So Spirit Fire suppressor, and then we're going to use the STV precision barrel. So this helps with the recoil and damage range. So under barrel again, I think that with this recent change to the Bruen heavy support grip and the fact that we have the Jack Glassless now, I think that this attachment is now balanced pretty well, whereas before it was on pretty much every build. So for this gun, I think, like one of the other ones I've mentioned prior, I think the Lock Grip Precision 40 is a better option, as long as you're using the Jack Glassless, because the Jack Glassless has that firing aim stability, which helps with visual recoil. So this will be the build I'd go with. It's very accurate, very low visual and actual recoil. You can pretty easily just beam that target at the end of the range. So I think that's a very, very solid choice. All right, this is going to be a BP50 that's built very specifically for the small maps, so keep that in mind. Recoil doesn't feel a whole lot different with a bunch of these different attachments, but we're building this for Rebirth, so we're going to get the ADS time ridiculously low. So this Moat 40 stock helps your ADS movement speed and your ADS time a little bit, as well as significant gun kick reduction and just regular recoil reduction. So we're going to use that. We are going to use the Lore 9 heavy barrel. This gives a bunch of damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil help. Hurts your sprint to fire, but we're not using this as an SMG, and it doesn't hurt your ADS time at all, which is pretty crazy for those numbers. Instead of using the VT7, since we're building this for the small map, we're going to use the Sonic Suppressor. So this has a tiny penalty to sprint to fire, tiny penalty to recoil, but it helps the bullet velocity and the damage range by a good amount, and still keeps you off the mini-map because it is a suppressor, obviously. So then we're going to use the SL Skeletal Vertical Grip. This is going to bring that ADS time down even lower, another -7%, as well as helping our vertical recoil and gun kick. Hurts horizontal recoil as well, but the horizontal recoil on this gun is not that difficult to deal with. It's just a tiny bit of an angle, so not a big deal there. And then obviously just the 45 round mag. So if you take this into the firing range, this has like 215 millisecond ADS time. So it's basically an SMG, but it's accurate enough that you can very, very easily just beam that last target still. So this, in my opinion, this is a very tough gun to beat for Rebirth right now, because you can get that ADS time down so low and still be effective at longer damage ranges. All right, last up here for the long range options, we're going to do the Pulemyot 762. So we are going to have the conversion kit, of course, the Jack Annihilator Bullpup conversion. We're going to use the conversion kit's long barrel. This helps with bullet velocity and damage range. It doesn't help with recoil at all, which is unfortunate, but huge benefits to the damage range. We're going to use the VT7 Spirit Fire suppressor, and then this is a pretty simple build. Bruen heavy support grip. It just feels the best on this weapon. Like I said, some guns it just feels really good on, and this is one of them. So there's the build right there. Jack Glassless. Take this into the firing range. Very easy to control. It still has a decent amount of visual recoil, even with the Bruen heavy support and the Jack Glassless. So keep that in mind. But I think this is an absolutely top tier choice for both controller and mouse and key. On to the close range weapons, we're going to start with the WSP9. So magazine, 50 round mag. I think that's just the best choice, just the biggest mag for trios and quads. DR6 hand stop, we're going to bring that sprint to fire and ADS time down with that. For suppressor, the Shadow Strike suppressor is pretty good. It just has no negatives and keeps you off the minimap. But I tend to use the Sonic Suppressor on my SMGs because it only has a 3% penalty. So it's like 3 milliseconds different on this weapon, and you get big bullet velocity and 5% damage range, and just a tiny penalty to recoil, which doesn't tend to be that important on close range weapons. And then we're going to use the Hiss Short Light Barrel. Again, this hurts recoil a little bit, but this gun has very little recoil to start with. Helps with ADS, sprint to fire, and movement speed a little bit. And then for the last attachment, I think that when I was using this, I The iron sights kind of get in the way, so I don't like the iron sights. So we're going to go with the Jack Glassless. Obviously, that helps with visual recoil as well. Excellent choice here. Like I said, in team fights, it's going to be really good. One-on-one situations where you both see each other at the same time because of that open bolt delay, probably better off with some other weapons. Next up, we got the Striker 9. This thing feels like it has a lot of recoil to me, so instead of using the Sonic Suppressor S, which increases recoil by a little bit, we're just going to use the Shadow Strike Suppressor. Barrel-wise, a few decent options here. This is going to hurt your damage range a lot, which I don't like, but it will make it feel lighter and quicker to move around, things like that. But I really like this Striker Recon Long Barrel. It has a 4% penalty to sprint to fire, which is very little, 3% penalty to your ADS movement, which is very little, but you get this huge, almost 20% boost to damage range and 15% to bullet velocity. Now, bullet velocity we don't care about basically at all, but damage range, 20% is significant, taking it from 12 meters up to 14.4. There's a lot of engagements that happen in that range, so I think it is worth using that barrel since it doesn't have too many negatives. 50-round drum for sure. And then for the last attachment, we are going to use the FTAC MSP 98 hand stop. Take a look at the recoil here to see how this feels visually as well. Iron sights are not awful. I think you could definitely get away with the iron sights. It still feels like it has a ton of recoil, but we chose this FTAC MSP 98 because it helps with vertical, hurts horizontal, but horizontal is not too much of an issue with this gun, especially because you're close range. But man, it feels like it has a lot of vertical recoil, so I like that. It's also going to really help your regular movement speed and your ADS movement speed. So you're going to be ADS walking really, really fast if you use that attachment. So last choice, I think you can decide on this one whether you want the Jack Glassless for a little bit better visual recoil or if you want actual recoil help. Me personally, if I was playing on controller, I would be going with the Socken ZX rear grip for actual recoil help rather than the optic. But if I was on mouse and key and I need to be able to see my target to hit them at all times, then I'd probably use the Jack Glassless. So either way, very good weapon. On to the WSP Swarm. This is actually back to being pretty good, where it was kind of out of the meta for a long time. We're going to use the Sonic Suppressor because we want that 5% damage range. The first damage drop-off is so short with this weapon. We want to extend that as much as possible. We also are going to be using either the 50 or the 100 round mag. You can decide which one you want. If you're playing quads and you don't care about being a little slower, then use the 100 rounds. But in general, probably 50 rounds is going to be enough. It does shoot really fast, though, so you're going to run out pretty quick. So in order to counter that magazine, we want the best ADS time attachment we can get for the underbarrel, so we're going to use the DR6 over the XRK Edge because it has a little better ADS time. Obviously helps with all the other movement speed and sprint to fire and everything as well. And then we're gonna sacrifice some close range stats here. So sprint to fire and ADS both get hurt a decent amount by this WSP Reckless 90 long barrel. But we really need to get that damage range up because this thing has such a short first damage range, and this gives 31%. So it gets you out to 8.8 with that first drop off, which is an extremely fast time to kill and helps the recoil a little bit. And this thing does have pretty wild recoil. So even though ADS time and sprint to fire are super important, we're going to use the Reckless 90 long barrel. And then for our last attachment, you can decide here again if you want to use an optic or this stock. So the recoil is crazy on this thing again, like I said. So we're going to sacrifice a little bit more close range stats. Thankfully, the base stats of this weapon are very good for an SMG. So ADS speed, even with all these attachments on there, is going to be 216, which is still very good, very competitive. Sprint to fire down at 107, which is a little higher than some of the other options, but still very good. But this stock is going to help us control that recoil for any engagements that are 20, 25 meters. And those do happen with your SMG. So a lot of people just ignore that, but those do happen. So with this build, it is iron sights. So you could decide if you want to use the Jack Glassless, but in most cases, you're not going to need that optic, I don't think, with this gun. If you're on mouse and key, it might be a good option, but overall, I think the stock is probably a little bit better choice. Just makes this thing a lot beamier with that stock. Last up, what I think is, in most cases, the best SMG right now is going to be the MCW with the Jack Raven conversion kit. So we're going to put that on there, put the 40 round mag on there, and then DR6 hand stop is excellent for trying to convert an AR into an SMG. We got a huge benefit to STF and ADS, and then we're also going to use this RB Rapid Strike rear grip. This does minus 28% to your sprint to fire, which is just essential. You have to put that attachment on there if you're going to use this as an SMG. And then last up, we're going to use the FSS Olay laser. So this is minus 5 to ADS and minus 12 to sprint to fire, getting you down to 112 millisecond sprint to fire, which is relatively competitive with the other SMGs. They're usually between like 90 and 110. So this is pretty close. ADS time is a little higher, but close as well, usually between like 190 and 210 for ADS in these SMGs. So we have crazy damage range, The one downside to this is that it's not suppressed, but in a lot of close range engagements, everybody knows where you are already because there's multiple people shooting, so I don't think it's as important in some cases there. The recoil is very manageable. The iron sights are pretty good. I think this is maybe the best SMG. There's some other ones that have better mobility and things, but I think that this is an awesome choice right now for both big map and small map. Alright guys, that is it for the video. As always, the best way to support is just a direct subscription through TrueGameData.com or the TGD apps for iOS and Android. We get the vast majority of that money, and it helps to support all the work I do on TGD for Warzone, Modern Warfare 3, COD Mobile, all the different games, and it gets you access to all the premium features as well, and it helps to support the YouTube channel because I don't have to make sensationalist content, because I don't have to try to make everything as optimized for the algorithm as possible to get a bunch of clicks and things like that, just because I have direct support elsewhere. So I always greatly appreciate those subs there, but thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.